me, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to keep this short, sweet, but basically, originally there was supposed to be, like, no chat or anything. I know that, like, a lot of people drove for it, so I was like, I'm going to do a quick Q&A, do a little bit of chat. I have bribery tools. I have, first of all, I think I have really cool, very different items of swag for anybody who comes and gets anything signed with me, but if somebody actually asks a question, I have like one of my only arcs of my next book, which is called City of Ghosts. So for those who don't know me, hi, I am Victoria. I also write as VE. I am the author of 13 novels. By the end of this year, it will be 15. I'm very tired thinking about that. Plus a comic series, which is starting this fall. I'm probably best known for the Shades of Magic series. Darker Shade of Magic is the first book in that. And I am also most recently did the Monsters of Verity books, which is this Savage song and our dark duet. And then I do the Villains series, which is Vicious and the upcoming Vengeful. And I am the City of Ghosts series, which is my new first ever original middle grade, which is very dark, very creepy, a little bit like Stranger Things meets Ghost Hunters. So that comes out in August. And basically, I'm not really a big fan of talking at people. I'd rather talk with them very briefly. So if anybody has any questions, I will answer it. And the first person to ask a question can get an arc. Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you pick the name Lila Bard for Lila?
Oh, okay. Hold on. First of all, so you can have the City of Ghosts.
Thank you so much.
So names are actually a really interesting thing for me in that I am not a very... I'm not very woo-woo when it comes to writing. I don't believe that, like, I sit there and wait for the muse to come and tell me what to do. Like, I very much believe in being the god of my own world when I'm writing. But names are the one thing that is a little bit amorphous for me. Names are a really important convention in most of my books. Many of my characters don't have their own name. Somebody else has given them one. And Delilah Bard is a really interesting case. For anyone who doesn't know, Delilah Bard is the main female lead in the Shades of Magic series. She is introduced as a cross-dressing pirate, aspiring pirate. She's currently land-bound, but like an aspiring pirate. And the thing about Delilah Bard's name that is incredibly important is that it doesn't fit her at all. And she says, one of the first things that she says about it is that it's a soft sound that she wields like a knife. And it was one of the very first pieces of description that I wrote about her was her relationship with her own name. So I'm a really odd case in that I did not have a name for the first week after I was born. My parents decided they would just live with me for a little bit and like see what kind of human I was. And because of that, I feel like my name is Victoria Elizabeth. It's like my mom is English, blame her for that. But it's always fit me. And so I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of names we have and names we choose and names that suit us and names that don't, you know? So, but it's one of those things where I don't actually really get to start writing a character, writing a story until I have their name. Yeah, any other questions? See, take the prize away. Yeah, there you go. Oh, favorite versus least favorite? My favorite character to write is probably Rye. I hesitate only because he's my favorite character, but he's actually very difficult to write because he's a performer, so he shifts a little bit to suit whoever it is that he's around. Lila's the easiest character to write because I always know what she's going to do. Like, she's very... I never am surprised by how she reacts. If I'm surprised, I've done something wrong. And then least favorite is... I hope the reason I have a hard time answering that is because my goal when I write a cast of characters, an ensemble series like Shades of Magic, is that even if a character is on page for a single page, I want you to feel like they have a book's worth of story. This just isn't their story. So I don't like to write characters that I don't like. Like Holland is one of my favorite characters. He was very difficult to write because he's sad and he was a long con. So like a lot of people hated him in book 1, but I know who he was going to be in book 3, and so for me, so I don't have any characters I don't like to write because I probably wouldn't write them as characters. It would mean that they're not interesting to me, and then I wouldn't put them in the book. But definitely Rye and Lila are at the top of the favorite writing part. Yeah. And, yes.
How's the transition from writing for like adult, young adult, middle grade?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I write basically a third now, like a little bit more adult than middle grade. The only difference for me is the version of myself that I'm writing for. Like, I do not write any differently. Like, the reason I hope people will like City of Ghosts regardless of your age is, like, I'm not writing to a different audience. I'm writing specifically to, like, 12-year-old me. And then the Archive series and Savage Song, those are written to 17-year-old me. The Shades of Magic series was written to 25 to 30-year-old me, so same with Vicious and Vengeful. But they're all me. Like, I was a really, really warped and dark and ambitious 12-year-old. I was a really warped, dark, ambitious 17-year-old. I'm a pretty warped, dark, and ambitious 30-year-old. So, like, the hope is that I think people like different books because the messages in them and the characters they respond to, but hopefully, I don't think many of my readers are shocked when they pick up one of my books that's out of one of those genres. So I try not to treat it any differently. I don't write down or up. I don't write darker or lighter. It's just what would be the most important thing to me at that period in my life. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of something I've noticed. I was actually introduced to your writing in a young adult literature class. We read Archived, which at that time was one of the first books that you'd written for that genre. And I've read your adult stuff too, and none of it is really, like, inappropriate, I think, for children or teenagers.
Yeah.
And so is that purposeful? Do you try to write in a way that, like, even if it's, like, directed at adults, kids can still read it?
So I think that my books are pretty violent is the only thing I would say, and they get increasingly more violent. They don't have a lot of sex because I'm, like, less interested in romance than I am in a lot of other kinds of dynamics, and they don't have a lot of cussing. They have a lot of fictional cussing in Shades of Magic. They don't have a lot of normal cussing because it's not because I want to, like... It would be disingenuous for me to claim that it was done from a marketing perspective. The reason it's done is I want my books to read as timeless as possible. I want the time period to be a little ambiguous, and linguistic styles like cursing is one of those things which will date a book. The way that people speak can date a book. So my characters, even the YA characters, tend to speak in a tiny bit more formal cadence or in a little bit more of a specific cadence to their environment. So I just am trying to do things that, yes, make the audience as broad as possible, but also interest me. And I don't want something in the book. Like, I remember very early on, I had The Near Witch, which was my very, very first book, and it originally had 5 curse words in it. And they weren't bad curse words. It was like 5 uses of the word damn. All right, and then my editor, each round of revision, cut 1. So then there were 4, and then there were 3, and then there were 2, and so she got it down to 1, and she's like, it's not that I have a problem with this word, it's just nowhere else in the book, so does it even need to be there? And so ever since then, I kind of wonder, I ask myself, like, what's the purpose? There are curse words, but I want them to have weight, and, like, the thing is that if you use a word to excess, it loses its power. So for me and for my characters, like, I find the most them way to express themselves, and sometimes that's, you know, with Kate Harker, I feel like there's more expletives to her than there is to somebody like August, who is other in a different way. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah.
Which story did you carry around with you the most? Like, which was the one that really took a long time to flesh out?
The ones I haven't written yet are the ones that are... No, I have a book I'm working on right now called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which has taken 6 years to this point. But the Shades of Magic series is really special because it's the only series that I wrote where I got about halfway through book 3 and was like, oh crap, like I wasn't ready to let go. Like, everyone said, oh, you'll write a trilogy and you'll be so tired of it by the time you get to the end of the trilogy. You won't be able to wait to move on to something new. And I got about 100, 200 pages into Conjuring of Light and was like, uh-oh. Like, I wanted to start opening new doors. I wanted to start planting new seeds, in part because I was ready to let go of a very specific story I was trying to tell, but I wasn't ready to let go of the characters in the world. So Shades is probably the one that pings at me most often in my brain, just kind of like the hold music. But honestly, like, I've had books that have stuck with me for a year while waiting, and I've had books that have waited for 6 or 7 years. So it's a very busy place inside my head these days. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
So I'm super excited about Homecoming Grace.
Yeah.
Are you planning on starting to do, like, a lot of anthology submissions, or is it going to become a rare thing?
It's rare for me. I'm going to be real. Like, I get a lot of anthology invitations, and I turn most of them down. Not because I don't love anthologies, but I did the Because You Love to Hate Me anthology, and the short story in that anthology is probably one of the things I'm proudest of. And it took me as long to write that 5,000 word short story as it does for me to draft a novel. Like so for me, the sanity and the just like the business savvy isn't there. So the only ones I've said yes to at this point are ones where I feel like I have something really strongly to say. And there's like another aspect to it too of sometimes I get invited to participate in an anthology and I don't feel like I'm the best voice for it, so I'll pass it up. But the Don't Call Me Crazy one is obviously something that was incredibly important to me. It's a anthology coming out later this year discussing mental health. 33 voices discussing mental health. And I'm really, really proud of it, but I put so much work into when I do accept an anthology invitation that I just have to be really selective about it. Yeah. I'd love to do more, but I'm just like already behind on everything that I have. Like I made a list of everything coming out this year and got tired looking at it, so.
So did all of us.
Yeah, I know. Someone online was like, you can slow down, and I was like, can I? Is that a thing? Because I think you spend a lot of time in this industry feeling like you can't slow down, like you have to be constantly moving forward. I also I'm a very idle hands kind of person. Like it's not good for me to slow down. So I'm very lucky that people are willing to be there on the receiving end of it. Anyone else? Yeah.
Okay, out of curiosity, I saw it in your bio on Twitter.
Yeah.
How many people have asked you how to pronounce rye?
Like several hundred. So for something to make my Twitter bio, it has to become annoying enough to me that like I feel I'm quite lazy when it comes to the internet. Like I don't update my website, things like that. But the only things I really want to do are get someone to write a bot that answers the archive questions and somebody to like answer how to pronounce rye, because it's rye like Y, but I get that like there's like Sarah J. Maas has a Reese. I think is what it is, and so yeah, and I don't really care. Rye would care, so it's like if it was any other character in that series, I'm not sure they would care, but Rye would definitely care, so I have to care on his behalf. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
So you were saying that you like seriously idle hands.
Yeah.
What is the longest time it's taken you to like? You have slumps.
No. Well, so the only reason I don't have slumps is because I always have something. I always use a cooking anthology that, like, creatively, I usually have at least 3 to 4 projects on a back burner doing like a slow cook at any given time. So 3 to 4 projects that I'm mulling. And so I'm always working like 2 to 4 years out mentally. So for instance, like I'm under contract through 2023, I think it is. And so I have like 2 to 3 projects a year from now until 2023. So there's always something waiting on deck, you know? So I get worried that I'm gonna run out of ideas, and then I will listen to a Lorde song, or I will go to a concert, or I will see a piece of art, or like a draw, and like something random, and it just starts the wheels turning. Because every single story for everyone is born out of the question, what if? So it's like all my brain is doing constantly is asking what if, you know?
Actually, do you have writer's block? Because I suffer from like writing anxiety when I have to write stuff, and I like stress about it so bad. Like
I have fear block.
Yeah.
Because I think like part of the problem with the concept of writer's block is it's not a monolith. Like we freeze for different reasons. We freeze because we don't know what happens next. We freeze because we're afraid to write what happens next. We freeze because we don't think we're good enough to write what happens next, or we freeze because we're distracted.
Right.
You know? So I get stuck. But I get stuck not creatively, I get stuck in my own way. Because I'm also a plotter, so like I have a game plan, pretty much. I can't write a series like Shades of Magic as a pantser. It doesn't, like, there are 4 major points of view in book 1, 8 major points of view in book 2, 12 points of view in book 3. Like, I would not be able to do that. And something like Vicious and Vengeful, they're told completely non-linearly. So there's no pantsing that can happen in that. Like it has to, for me, be really structure based. For me, I get so much joy out of the execution of something, not the wandering lost in the woods part of it. That just makes me incredibly anxious. But most of the time when I get stuck, it's because I'm distracted. So, or I'm letting a lot in. And so I have a lot of tips and tricks from moving to pen and paper to, my editor has a trick she taught me of like, listen to a song, but like the moment the song ends, that's when you start focusing. So you can waste time for the length of the song, and then as soon as the song is over, you need to put in 25 minutes of just stare at it. So I find most of the time it's either anxiety over I'm not going to be able to do it well enough, or fear that it's not going to be like that. I have a lot of fear right now because there's a very high, like I have a lot of readers who love Shades of Magic, and then it's scary to work on Threads of Power, which is the next arc. I have a lot of readers who have very strong feelings about Vicious, which makes it very daunting to work on Vengeful. So I'm usually just getting in my own way. I think 90% of the time when we have writer's block, what we actually have is an anxiety block or a stress block or a distraction block.